YouTube, welcome to Jackie's Lair Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for my check-in of the year. So it's almost the end of the month, the end of the year. So I might get some other books in. I mean, I'm gonna read, and I'm not a reread. This is not gonna be like a month of rereads or anything. It's gonna, I'm still gonna have getting books, but I thought I would go ahead and update you on the books that I've read so far. Now I've completed my goals, and then also elaborate more on my goals, my goal for next year, because I did do a video where I talked about my one goal I'm gonna focus on, but I feel like I do have some secondary and sub goals I want to focus on this year and in 2024 as well. So first I'm going to talk about the main goal I have, which is, and my check-in for how I did this year with that goal. And that is my my bigger books, my tomes. So this year I feel like I completed 4 big tomes. So I'm not counting The Shadow of What Was Lost or the 2 books from the Powder Mage trilogy, because those didn't take me that long to read. And they're really not that long. They're chunksters. But I mean, The Shadow of What Was Lost, that might be a little bit longer, but it's still, I feel like it's still, not that they're any less than the other ones, but I feel like it's not as big of an accomplishment as with the other ones, the other 4 books. So those books that I read were The Physician by Noah Gordon. This is historical fiction. And I don't know how many pages it was, but it was like in the 800, 900 page mark. And I do think if you like to read fiction and you're in the medical profession, you might enjoy this book. I mean, unless you just don't like super long books, because it is a long book. I mean, it's on this list. But I mean, I think you might find it really interesting and fascinating to learn about like the medical profession historically, and also a different culture. Because our main character has to go eventually, if he wants to go to the best physician school, he has to go to Persia to do that. But then he is a Christian, so he also go to not only has to go to travel to Persia, but he also decides to pretend to, be Jewish. So it also discusses religion and the different types of religions. So it was a really good read. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I feel good that I could say I was able to finish it. Then the other one was Anna Karenina, which is not Tolstoy's longest book. I think that goes to War and Peace, which I do want to pick up again and start reading that one again as well. I might pick it up in 2024, but I don't know if I would actually finish it. I think that would definitely be an accomplishment if I did. But this one was also really good. It was, our title character and the other main characters, their life journeys. It has some slow moments. There's a lot of talk of politics and farming. That's not for everybody, but I still think it was a great book. It was very tragic, especially for our title character, but it was just a really, really good read. And then the other 2 were actually fantasy. So I read the first book in the Chorus of Dragons series, which I think is complete. I think all the books are out. That was Ruin of Kings. And I also read The Way of Kings, which is definitely, because that one is definitely accomplished, because I've been reading that one for years, picking up and then putting it down, and picking up and making progress and then putting it down. And I guess I always worry when it comes to those situations like that when I tell people that, they'll think, oh, you must not actually like the book, so why do you keep picking it up? You must be bored with it. It's like, no, I enjoy it. I'm not bored with it. It's just, it's a long book. It's over 1,000 pages, so it's hard for me to commit to that all the time. It doesn't mean I'm not engaged in the story, because every time I pick it up, I am interested and I'm excited to read it. It's just I'm thinking about all the other books I could read that won't take me as much time. So those are the 4 books. So here's what I'm going to do this year. With all those book categories / genres, I am going to make sure I read books that one book more than what I completed the previous year. So this year in 2023, I read 4, so I need to read 5. Now, if by the end of December, I read and finish Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which is a 1,000-page mark as well, then that would mean I have to read 6. I would have to get through 6 books. 6 books that length. Not exactly that length, but like in the 800, 900 page mark is good. But that's if I get through Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. So if I read that in December and finish it, then that would be 6. Then I would need to read 6. Or no, 7 actually. Sorry, I mean 7 because that would be 6. Because I think well no, because I've read 4, so I need to read 5. So no, I was right in the first place. 6. I would need to read 6 novels in that length. So then we have horror books. Let's talk horror. Okay, so horror books. Black Mount I read by Ron Malfi. That was really good. I enjoyed that one. It had a bit of a Stephen King vibe to it with these group of main characters that were just kids that they were dealing with a horror that they experienced when they were younger. And they have to come back to it. And then after that, the next horror I read was Salem's Lot, which was a reread from, I read that one years ago. So that's 3 or 2. Yeah, that's 2. That's Stephen King's take on vampires in suburbia. So, which I think, I haven't read it yet, but I think it'd be interesting to read that one, Salem's Lot, and then read, the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, because that also takes place in the suburbia in the 90s. So I think reading those 2 books together would be an interesting experience because it kind of has a similar setting, just a different time period. And one is more focused on a male perspective, and then that one is kind of focused on a woman's perspective. So it'd be kind of fun to read those 2 together. And then I finished up Skeleton Crew and read the last few stories in that collection this year. Which was Word Processor of the Gods, The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands, Beach World, Reaper's Image. So I finished Skeleton Crew in that same month, in that same time frame. So that was 3 books. And then after that, the next time I read the last book I read in the horror book was at the end of the first quarter, which was The Curse of Crow Hollow by Billy Coffey, which I really liked. Again, that was another, we got some Stephen King vibes here with the small town. And it dealt with a little bit of it dealt with some racism in the story, and one of those stories where it's like looking at, is this justified in a character taking revenge and that kind of story, and the next generation be punished for the parents' mistakes, which kind of reminds me of what they did with the new Goosebumps series, where the kids were being punished by their parents' mistakes. Their kids suffer the consequences of those actions. But I really like The Curse of Crow Hollow, so that's 4 books. Which, by the way, also one of my sub goals is also, again, to still continue focusing on Stephen King. I still, as I mentioned in my previous video where I talked about the one goal I originally had for 2024. I did mention that I still don't I'm not giving up on the whole horror, reading different horror authors. Well, in this case, not just different horror authors, but also expanding, reading more Stephen King. Like going through his library and reading, his more of his books each month. So I haven't totally let go of that goal. But, so I read, like I said, I read Skeleton Crew. And then I also, the first quarter was The Wastelands, I think was. Yeah, The Wastelands. But that's not horror, so that's just another Stephen King book. So in the second quarter, oh, actually, okay, so no, I did not finish Skeleton Crew in the first quarter. I finished it in the second quarter because there's a few more stories in the collection that I hadn't read. So so this is when I finished Skeleton Crew because I read Nona for Owen, although Owen wasn't technically a horror story. It was more of a poem for his son, for Stephen King's son. So I read Nona and Survivor Type was another one, and then Uncle Otto's Truck, Morning Deliveries, Big Wheels, Grandma, The Battle of the Flexible Bullet, and The Reach. Okay, so I finished Skeleton Crew. So now we're 4. Now it's 4 books. Because I didn't finish Skeleton Crew until the second quarter. So that was the last for the second quarter of of horror. Okay, Mysteries of Udolpho was another horror that I read, so that's 5 horror. And 5, 6. Okay, so I miscounted my horror reads when I was filming this early, when I tried to film this earlier. So I miscounted. Okay, so actually I read 6 horror books. So I actually have to read 7, so 6, and then after we are on the 4th quarter now, like I said, I'm not done with this. It's not technically the end of the year because we still have December, and I'm still going to be reading some in December. So 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10, and I just counted 3 different stories from Ian Gordon's collection because I DNF'd that collection, so I'm just counting the 3 stories that I read, so that's 9 short stories in that collection. And then The Mask of the Red Death I read in this collection, and that was a different collection. That was the Edgar Allan Poe one, so that's 10 and 11, okay, and 12. Oh, so over 12 horror, if you count the stories. So yeah, so I guess I have to read 13. Ooh, 13. That's an unlucky number. I have to read 13 horror books in 2024. So sorry, I told, which, although I guess it doesn't matter because you won't be seeing the previous video I attempted to film. Which the only reason why I forgot is because I realized I didn't have my ring light on. And, I feel like, I don't know if you guys care. Maybe you guys don't even notice, but I use it, so I don't want to forget it. So I think it looks better with the ring light. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to refilm this. So 13. So I gotta read 13 horror next year. In 2024. And then as far as Stephen King goes, I need to read. Okay, so I read Skeleton Crew. I read The Bag of Bones. that? Let me go back. Okay, now I gotta look back. Oh, so Skeleton Crew, Bag of Bones, and then we have The Wastelands. The Wastelands. Let's see, I'm looking. Yeah, because I haven't read any Stephen King in the fourth quarter yet. So, yeah, so The Wastelands, Bag of Bones, and Skeleton Crew. So I've only read 3 Stephen Kings. So I have to read 4 Stephen King books. And that would, so what I could do is read the whole collection, because I have meaning to reread 4 Past Midnight. The whole collection. But part of me will feel like that's a cheat. And then another thing is that also, I might be like, oh, I completed, I might feel like, oh, I completed this novel, but maybe I want to read something different, and outside this collection. So like I said, either I could read from that collection and that would count as 4, or I could read 1 from that collection and then read something else. And I can always, I don't have to stay with that number. I'm just doing that for the sake of, for categories, like whether it's a genre or a type of book. I'm just, saying like I need to read at least 1 more than how many I read this in 2023. Okay, now let's go to nonfiction. See how my nonfiction went this year. Okay, so I read, let's see, what were the nonfiction? Okay, so the first nonfiction I read in 2023 is We Don't Need Roads by Cassim Gaines. This is We Don't Need Roads, the making of the Back to the Future trilogy, the first sci-fi I ever got into. If you are a big fan and grew up with Back to the Future, this I think is a really great book to look at, to read, because it has a deep dive into how the movie trilogy was made, and also probably looks at some of the stories and rumors, and kind of explains things to, and goes into more detail about some of these things, like the whole thing with Crispin Glover, and I did know that Michael J. Fox was not the first person that was cast. Someone else was playing his role, and that's who they originally wanted to play. Michael J. Fox, they wanted him to play the role, but then he couldn't because of family ties. But then they ended up getting him because the other actor, I'm trying to think of his name, but he's a known actor. He was not working for the role. So it kind of goes into detail about stuff like that. And then, I wouldn't have it on here. Okay, so I did have 2 DNFs for nonfiction reads, which were a book that I don't know if it's considered nonfiction or not. It's Memoirs and Misinformation by Jim Carrey and Dana Bachion. This was originally, supposedly, or at least as I understood it looking at the book, I thought it was going to be an actual memoir. And I put it on my Amazon wishlist, and I did get it for Christmas last year. And I feel bad that I DNF'd it because it was a gift, and it's a hardback book, so it's naturally a little bit more expensive. And it ended up being a disappointment. I was not happy with it. I was confused. I thought it was an actual memoir in Jim Carrey's life, but it was not. Or it was and it wasn't. It's hard to explain, but I think it was like kind of a fictionalized version of his life. And I guess maybe he didn't really want to write a memoir, like he did and he didn't. Maybe. But if he writes a real life, genuine memoir, or someone writes a biography about him, I will read it. But I was very disappointed in this book. Like I said, I don't know if he'd be considered nonfiction or not, but I thought it was. I interpreted it as that as such, but then it just didn't read like nonfiction. It did not read like what I was expecting. It was kind of going for a writing style that was very artistic like and trying to be unconventional, unique, and artsy, and it wasn't for me. And then the other that I DNF'd was one that I should have known that it wouldn't be the first book for me, and that is Darwin's Origin of the Species. Is one of these ones that I was attempting to read it. I was trying to read it, and okay, that was just really weird. Something just popped on my screen, a little thumbs up thing that just a thumbs up bubble popped on my screen. I don't know why. That was just weird. Maybe I'll check my text messages or something. Sorry, but anyway, let me get back to this check-in video. And I ended up, and it was just very dense. It was just not the book for me. It's a classic, and I wanted to be like, I can read this book, and it did not happen. And then we have, so after, those were the two DNFs. The nonfiction I didn't finish. Like I said, I don't know if Memoirs of Mr. Horatio would be considered nonfiction or not. But I'm counting it as such. Okay, so after that, I didn't read any nonfiction for a while, which I was going to put pressure on myself. So that's... let's see. How many nonfiction? Okay, so let's see. It's one... Okay, so really one nonfiction completed and the other two are DNFs. Okay, so one nonfiction completed. Okay, so afterwards, let's see, what were my... Did I read any nonfiction then? Okay, now... Oh, wait, when did I read... Okay, where is it? When did I read... Okay, sorry, I'm trying to think, when did I read... Oh, here it is. Okay, so, then I read, and that was quarter 2, so I only read one nonfiction in the first quarter. In second quarter, I read a nonfiction, which was Hadrian and the Triumph of Rome. I've been wanting to read about the different Roman emperors and the history of Rome and all that, so I picked up this one, and it wasn't super long. It was a really good biography about Rome, about Hadrian and his time as a Roman emperor and what he did for Rome, the good and the bad. His obsession with Greece and his Greek lover, his little Greek boyfriend, and all that. So that was really great. That was really fun. I'm glad I read more about the other Roman emperors. At least one of them. They do talk about Trajan a little bit, because I think Trajan was his adopted father. Okay, and then, so after that, so did I read? Okay, so in third quarter was Jane Austen July, so, I read, Jane Austen in Real Life, A Life in Small Things by Paula Byrne. That was really good. And it was a very unique take on history about Jane Austen, because it looked at some of the things that the things that her family might have had in their household, and even talked about like her writing desk, her brother's little tricorner hat, and his time in the Navy, and, the carriages they might have used, and, Indian shawls, and all that stuff. It was a way to lead into things about her life and the history of the world that she grew up in. because there's so many biographies, so many books that look at Jane Austen. We need books to look at her in a from different angles. Like, I feel like you gotta find that. So that was really good. And I mean, you could do books, nonfiction, that are like your experience with Jane Austen. But everybody's experiences are probably, well, I guess I shouldn't say that, but everybody's experiences might seem similar in a lot of ways. So I just think it's really hard to write nonfiction about Jane Austen. And be unique about it. But I enjoyed that. And then we're on to fourth quarter. So I didn't read any nonfiction in September or October. It wasn't until now, in November, when I read more nonfiction. So I read only 2 nonfiction. And I'm just happy about that. I wasn't gonna put any pressure on myself. And I don't know, I probably won't get any more nonfiction read. Although I did start reading London Labours and London Poor, because that was motivated by like our trip to London, but you guys know we canceled that. So I was going to read that one. I was going to read that one, since I have more time now to read more about the history of England and London. But then I picked it up and I just was not feeling it. It was, basically talking, giving information about the whole environment of the London streets and the different vendors and stuff. And I just wasn't feeling it. So maybe I'll come back to it, because I do want to read more about London and the history of London. So the ones I did read were, first one I read was the first week in Florida via Kindle. I read The Knights Templar by Captivating History. I've always been intrigued by the Knights Templar and the mystery behind them and what their whole story is, like most people. And this kind of looked at that and talked about it. I think it's a good starting book. When you first learn about the Knights Templar, it's a good place to start. And it does debunk some of the theories and rumors about the Knights Templar, but it talked about the truth behind them and what they did for the country and all that. So I think that's worth the read if you are interested in the Knights Templar. And then the last book was Inspired by Jennifer Brooks, from BookTube. She is a big fan of Mary and Percy Shelley. Currently, she's been reading Percy's romantic poetry, because he was one of the romantic poets, and she's been reading Mary Shelley's works. So, I saw this at the roast office, and I decided to pick it up because I love Frankenstein, and I like listening to Jennifer Brooks' video when she talks about Mary Shelley. She recently did a video where she talked about the other nonfiction, including this one, In Search of Mary Shelley, by Fiona Sampson. She even mentions this one, but like me, she was surprised that it was so short, because it's not a super long biography. All my other biographies are huge. That's why I don't ever finish them. But I was able, for the sake of, adding another nonfiction list to, to have finished, which I know that shouldn't be the main reason, but it was just kind of nice to be able to, I was still able to get the information and learn about Mary Shelley, but it wouldn't take me too long. But I was also disappointed and surprised it wasn't that long. And I remember when Jennifer Brooks mentioned this book, she also said that she was surprised. It's like a deep dive from her birth to her widowhood. And it focuses a lot on her marriage to Percy Shelley and writing Frankenstein, which is one of my favorite classics. And which unfortunately it makes me not love Percy Shelley and be a little reluctant to read some of his poetry, because I don't like the way he treated Mary, or his first wife for that matter, before Mary. to read, But it was like definitely a good, good read. I enjoy that. But that video that Jennifer Brooks just did on the different nonfiction about Mary Shelley, I did file away 2 of the books she recommended as books I will either buy a physical copy or I'll get on Kindle. So yeah, that was the last nonfiction I read for Nonfiction November. Like I said, I probably won't read any more nonfiction. And the next shortest nonfiction that I have, I probably will save it for January to make sure I get nonfiction read that I actually can finish. Again, I know that's not the priority, you should just enjoy books. But then again, it's not fiction, it's nonfiction, so it's giving you information. So it's a little different. I feel like I feel like it's a little different than fiction. It's about learning something, and yeah, you can enjoy nonfiction, but it's not like we're fiction where taking, you kind of want to take in the story and do slowly and be slow about, taking in the story and really absorbing it. So I think that's really it. Like I said, so the goals, like my main goal that I'm going to focus on is reading my bigger books. But I also want to still continue to make sure I read other horror authors' works. And I also want to continue to make sure I get my Stephen King read. And then, and of course there's the whole series goal. I'm not totally putting that on the back burner. I do want to get series read as well, make some progress on those. And I still have other trilogies that I could get through that won't take me as long as series will. Next year, I do want to pick up, probably either next year or in December, I'm going to pick up books like Clash of Kings and Shadow Rising. Especially like Shadow Rising, because that's one that I haven't. And the next book, An Echo of Things to Come, the sequel to The Shadow of What Was Lost. I can't believe I remember that title. That is a tongue twister of a title, but I remembered it. So yeah, with the series, I want to make some more progress. Make sure I make progress in the series, and like the Lycanus is a trilogy, so I need to get that one done. So it might, but the situation may be like with Black Powder, where I read the first book, and then it's like a period of time before I read books 2 and 3. And then we have, and I still gotta get the second book, the sequel to that Pride and Prejudice retelling with the dragons. I don't know what that trilogy is called at the moment. I gotta get the second book of that, and then there's series like the Temeraire series. And I keep going back and forth with Malazan series, because it's like, am I only reading it because all these fantasy booktubers that I like are talking about how great it is, or am I only reading it because of that, or do I genuinely want to read it? I mean, I did like the first book, but I haven't been motivated to pick up the rest of the series. So I did put it in the donation pile for now. I mean, I might change my mind. But it's a big commitment, and there are aspects of it are, so I don't know if I'll, like I said, it's in the pile. We'll see what happens. But, and then the other are like, reading, and then I want to continue, the other genres like historical fiction, and I still am trying to get into science fiction. That's a bit of a struggle. And, nonfiction, of course, that's a priority. Try to read as much as I can of nonfiction. And maybe by November of next year, I might read 3 nonfiction. But, I mean, a lot of my nonfiction is big. So, I don't know. I might just have to be happy with just at least 1 nonfiction. And, think that's all of it. I mean, I'm sure when I'm done filming this, I'm going to realize, oh, I should have mentioned this. But I don't want to take too long with this video because, like, we are trying... I don't know. I have to make sure, you know... I don't want to let Murphy up here because there's a lot of stuff he might get a hold of. And then so I have to pay attention to him. And then I don't, you know, after I'm done filming, I'm going to go check on him, see how he's doing. But I wanted to get another video filmed today. So so I'm going to stop for now, check on Murphy, and then, you know, I got to finish doing some other stuff. Get some reading done. I mean, luckily I've read a second book in another series of mine. The Saxon series. I'm reading book 2, which is The Pale Horseman. And then next December, in December, I'm going to read another one, the third book in the series, because that's another thing, I don't want to fall behind on my series, so, and those books are not that long, they don't look that long, so, and they're easy to read. But anyway, if you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, click subscribe if you haven't, click the bell notification below if you want to be notified. I hope your last 2 months of reading go well this year, and as I said in the previous video, when I talked about my goal, if you have any goals of your own that you would like to talk about, that you want to read, please feel free to share in the comments below. I will let you know what those goals are, unless, you know, maybe you're just not a goal person, you just want to read whatever you want to read, then, you know, that's great too. And I will talk to you all later. All right. Bye.